Your luck was never luck. Somewhere in the last few days, a name resurfaced. A message showed up with no explanation. A door you thought was closed cracked open again, and you called it coincidence, because that's easier than asking what it actually was. I'm going to take that apart, layer by layer, until we reach the last one, the one that changes how you read every coincidence still waiting for you. But before I explain anything, notice your breath. Right now. It just changed. You didn't consciously order that, and that's not random either. You're not imagining this. This isn't something broken in you, waiting to be fixed. It's a signal, the first one, and probably the smallest. Air is moving through a narrow opening in your throat right now, the same way light moves through the smallest gap and still finds its way to the other side. Keep that image. It's about to become the exact shape of everything that follows. How a life finds its way through an opening most people are too busy to notice. You're inside one of these sequences right now. You just haven't been shown where it starts. The first thing that has to come apart is the word itself. Luck. Most people spend their whole life treating luck as an event. A single moment that either lands on you or doesn't. A call, a check, a chance meeting. When it happens once, they call it coincidence. When 3 or 4 of those moments show up close together, they call it a lucky stretch, and they usually credit the universe, or good timing, or simply being in the right place. But that's not actually an explanation. It's a label for something that already happened, applied after the fact. It tells you nothing about what to do next. Sit with the contrast. A coincidence is a single point. A run of good luck is a cluster, several points close enough together that they start to look connected. Clusters don't form randomly. They form around a condition. Something changes first, and the events that follow are simply what becomes visible once that change is in place. So the real question was never why do some people have more luck than others? It's this: what changes in a person right before the events start to gather? That's what the next several minutes are actually about. Not a superstition. Not a lucky object or a phrase you repeat until you believe it. 3 specific, learnable movements. Breathe, observe, receive, each one describing exactly what shifts in someone right before a cluster begins. You already felt the first one starting in your own body a minute ago. That wasn't decoration. It was the entry point. There's a phrase that's going to come back more than once before this is over. Where attention rests, reality arranges itself. Right now, it probably sounds like something written on a poster. Stay with it anyway. By the time we're finished, it will mean something much more specific and much more useful than it does right now. Because here is what tends to happen instead, to almost everyone, almost every day. A small opening arrives, unremarkable, easy to miss, and it gets missed. Not because it wasn't real, because nothing in the person meeting it had changed yet. The event was there. The capacity to notice it wasn't. If you're willing to actually test this instead of just watching it, follow the channel now. So the layers still coming are already waiting for you when you need them. That's the cost of ignoring this. Not one dramatic loss, but a quiet, repeating one. Openings that keep arriving and keep going unrecognized, one after another, until noticing them becomes the exception instead of the rule. We're going to change that, starting with the part of you that's already changing without asking your permission. That starts with something you're already carrying, whether you've noticed it or not. There's a question worth asking honestly, not rhetorically. Have you ever noticed a name, a number, a phrase appear more than once in a short window of time and felt something you couldn't quite name, somewhere between curiosity and unease? Most people either dismiss it completely or swing to the opposite extreme and decide it means everything, that some cosmic hand is spelling out a message meant only for them. Both of those are ways of avoiding the actual, more interesting question underneath. What does it mean that your attention was even in a position to catch it? Because that's the part almost nobody asks. Not what does the sign mean, but why did I notice this one, out of the thousands of things I didn't? Something in you was already reorganizing. A period of internal change tends to arrive right before the sense of coincidence increases. A decision made quietly, a tension released, a question you finally stopped avoiding. Not because the universe suddenly started producing more of them, because your filter changed and it started letting more of them through. That's the honest version of this. Not the universe sent you a sign. Something closer to your own state shifted, and shifted states notice differently. Psychologists have a word for this kind of meaningful coincidence: synchronicity. And however you feel about the term itself, the underlying observation is hard to argue with. Certain periods of a person's life produce a noticeably higher density of moments that feel connected, and those periods tend to cluster around internal transitions, not external ones. A relationship ending, a decision finally made, a belief quietly abandoned. The coincidences don't cause the transition. They become visible because of it. Here is the phrase again, and this time it earns its meaning. Where attention rests, reality arranges itself. It doesn't mean your thoughts are physically rearranging matter around you. It means something far more provable and just as important. Out of the thousands of stimuli, events, and small possibilities available to you in a single day, attention decides which ones you register, which ones you consider relevant, and which ones you act on. Reality isn't arranging itself for you. Your relationship to it is arranging what you're able to meet. So the first movement is the one that changes your relationship to attention itself. It's the simplest one and the most overlooked, because it's already running in the background of your life, whether you notice it or not. None of this asks you to believe anything you can't verify for yourself within the next few days. That's deliberate, not a claim to take on faith, an observation you're about to be equipped to test in your own life, starting with something as ordinary as your own breathing. Breathe. Your breathing does something almost nothing else in your body does. It runs automatically, without a single instruction from you, every second of every day. And it can also be taken over, deliberately, the moment you decide to. It is the one bridge you carry with you between what happens on its own and what you can actually reach into and change. That's not a small detail. That's the entire reason to start here instead of somewhere more dramatic. Exhaling longer than you inhale signals something specific to your nervous system: the absence of immediate threat. And when threat drops, availability rises. You take in more. You notice more. The aperture widens, slightly but measurably, every time you let the air out slower than you pulled it in. This isn't abstract. Your body is, at every moment, running a background calculation about safety, scanning tone of voice, muscle tension, the pace of your own breathing, and deciding, mostly outside conscious awareness, how much of the world is safe enough to notice right now. Under threat, real or perceived, that calculation narrows deliberately. Attention collapses onto whatever might be dangerous and screens out almost everything else. That narrowing served you well when danger was physical and immediate. It serves you far less well when what's actually in front of you is a small, ambiguous opportunity that requires a wide, calm field of attention to even register. So breathing, in this context, isn't relaxation for its own sake. It isn't a wellness habit. It's perceptual preparation, the literal widening of what you're equipped to catch. And this is the part that trips almost everyone up the first time they try it. The moment you start trying hard to feel calm, or trying hard to attract a particular outcome, you accomplish the opposite of what you intended. Effort has a signature, and your body reads it instantly. Reaching for a state tells your system, unmistakably, that the state isn't present yet. Otherwise, you wouldn't be reaching. The harder you chase calm, the more certain your body becomes that calm is missing. So the actual instruction isn't pursue the state. It's stop obstructing it. Those sound similar. They are not. Pursuing confirms absence. Releasing reduces resistance. One adds tension in the direction of a goal. The other simply gets out of the way of something that was already trying to happen. This matters far beyond breathing, because it describes the entire difference between chasing and allowing, the distinction this whole video eventually rests on. Now, a second thing is true about attention, and it has nothing to do with mysticism at all. You already have direct, personal proof of it. Think about the last time you decided to buy something specific. A particular model of car is the easiest example. Within days, sometimes hours, you start seeing that exact car everywhere. On the road, in parking lots, in the background of a show you're watching. The cars didn't multiply. They were always there. What changed was relevance. Your filter learned, almost instantly, what to flag as worth noticing, and started surfacing it constantly once it did. If your perception can be trained, without effort, to spot a car, a fairly ordinary object with no personal stakes attached to it, it can also be trained deliberately to spot something with actual stakes. An opening, a door that would have been filtered out as background noise a month ago, now flagged, now visible, simply because you told your own attention what mattered. The same mechanism shows up constantly in contexts that have nothing to do with luck. Someone who's just found out they're expecting a child suddenly notices strollers, maternity clothes, and other pregnant people everywhere, as if the city had quietly filled up with them overnight. It hadn't. The relevance filter simply recalibrated overnight, and what used to be invisible became impossible to miss. Luck-relevant information works the same way. The events were always arriving. What determines whether you catch them is exactly this. Has your filter been told, clearly, that they matter? That's the first movement, in full. Breathe to widen the aperture. Stop obstructing instead of chasing. Train relevance the same way you'd train it for anything else you decided mattered. The second movement takes that widened attention and asks what to actually do with it. Observe. There's an experiment from physics you've probably heard fragments of, the double-slit experiment. Particles fired through two openings behave one way when unobserved, and differently the moment something measures which path they took. It's one of the strangest, most argued over results in modern physics, and it deserves to stay exactly that. Strange, argued over, unresolved. This isn't a claim that watching your life changes physical outcomes the way it changes subatomic particles. Nobody credible makes that leap, and this video won't either. But keep the image, because as a metaphor, not a mechanism, it teaches something worth carrying. The way you observe changes the data you collect. Not the world. The data, what you register, what you file away as meaningful, what you're even willing to count as evidence. All of that shifts depending on how you're watching. None of this requires you to take a position on unresolved physics to use it. You don't need to believe observation shapes subatomic particles to notice that your own observation, deliberately widened or narrowed, changes what you register about your own life. That part isn't a metaphor. That part you can test starting today. And there are two very different ways to watch, and most people, without ever choosing to, default into the wrong one. Waiting measures the distance to what's missing. It scans for the gap. It asks continuously, has it happened yet? And every time the answer is no, it reinforces the absence a little more. Waiting is exhausting precisely because it's built to notice lack. Watching does something else entirely. It stays with what's present. It looks for early signals instead of finished results. It's willing to accept partial, imperfect evidence instead of demanding the whole picture before it counts as real. It notices small, unglamorous things and takes them seriously instead of waiting for something bigger to arrive first. Consider what that looks like in an ordinary week, away from any of this language. Someone spends months scrolling past job listings, scanning for one very specific title, one very specific salary, one very specific company name. Nothing matches, so nothing registers. Even the listings that might have led somewhere interesting get filtered out because they don't match the exact shape being searched for. That's waiting, dressed up as searching. Watching would have looked different, not scanning for the one exact match, but staying present with what's actually there, noticing which companies keep coming up, which type of role keeps appearing in slightly different forms, which connections keep resurfacing in conversations that have nothing to do with the job search at all. None of that guarantees an outcome, but it collects far more usable information than waiting ever does, because it isn't discarding 90% of what shows up before it's even been considered. Sit with this possibility, uncomfortably if it needs to be. A lot of people who consider themselves unlucky may not actually be unlucky at all. They may simply have become extremely skilled at waiting and never learn to watch. There's a small physical practice that helps make this shift. A hand resting over the chest, a few slower exhales, sometimes a single word attached to something you're hoping for. It isn't a spell. It isn't magic. It's a symbol, deliberately simple, aimed at one outcome only: bodily consent. Not forcing a door open, letting your own nervous system stop bracing against it. And there's one more thing worth naming clearly before we move forward, because it explains why past attempts at this may not have worked. Most people run this entire method backward without realizing it. Instead of breathe, observe, Receive. They do receive, observe, breathe. They decide in advance exactly what they're supposed to get. They scan only for that exact shape, reject anything that doesn't match it, tighten with every day it doesn't appear, and only try to calm down once they're already exhausted from the search. That's not a small mistake. That's the entire method, running in reverse, from the very first step. Notice what's actually being described here. It isn't a technique bolted onto your existing life. It's a different relationship to your own attention, and relationships like that don't reverse themselves instantly just because you understood them once. They take practice, the same way anything worth doing does. Which brings us to what happens when someone actually gets it in the right order, not as a concept anymore, but as something that plays out, in full, in a single ordinary week. If breathe and observe already landed somewhere real, tap like now. It's a small, physical way of marking that this is worth carrying into what comes next. Picture a woman waking at 3 in the morning for no reason at all. No dream she can recall, no sound in the house, nothing wrong that she can point to, just awake, staring at the ceiling, her breath a little shallow, her mind already reaching for an explanation it won't find tonight. She doesn't think much of it. She goes back to sleep eventually, and by morning it's already filed away as nothing. Bad night. Too much coffee. Whatever. 2 days later, a name she hasn't thought about in years shows up in her inbox. Someone she worked with briefly, years ago, reaching out with a question that barely needs answering. She almost deletes it without replying. It seems small, barely worth the 2 minutes it would take to respond. She almost does exactly what most people do with almost everything that eventually turns out to matter. She almost decides it isn't important enough to deserve her attention. But something, maybe the same something that had her staring at the ceiling 2 nights earlier, makes her reply anyway. A short message. Nothing dramatic. Just, "Good to hear from you. How have you been?" A week passes. Nothing happens. She forgets about it entirely. Then the reply comes, and buried near the bottom, almost as an afterthought, is a mention of an opening at the company that name now works for, a role she'd have wanted badly. 2 years ago, back when she was actively looking and heard nothing but silence. Now it just shows up, sideways, in a message she almost didn't send in the first place. This is where it gets interesting, because it's exactly where most people, including her in earlier versions of herself, would have gotten it wrong. She had a very specific idea of what she was hoping for. Not this, something bigger, something that arrived with more certainty attached to it, something that didn't require her to reply to an old coworker's forgettable email and then wait and hope a company she'd have to research from scratch might actually call her back. She wanted the result to look a particular way, and this didn't look like that. So for about 4 days, she did what almost everyone does when a small, ambiguous opportunity doesn't match the shape they were expecting. She tried to force it. She rehearsed what she'd say if they called. She checked her email more than she'd admit to anyone. She got tense every time a day passed without a response, and that tension didn't stay contained. It leaked into everything else, into how she slept, into how she talked to the people around her, into a low, constant hum of, "Are they going to call? Why haven't they called? What does the silence mean?" She wasn't anxious, exactly. Anxious implies fear of a bad outcome. And this wasn't quite that. It was closer to a kind of gripping impatience, the specific tension of wanting to control the exact shape and timing of something that was never fully hers to control in the first place. That's a distinction worth naming, because it's rarely the fear of loss that ruins an opening like this. It's usually the refusal to let it arrive on terms other than the ones already decided in advance. That's receive, observe, breathe, run entirely backward. Decide exactly what you're owed. Scan obsessively for that exact shape. Reject or minimize everything that doesn't match it. Tighten with every hour it doesn't appear. Try to calm down only once you're already worn out from the waiting. It didn't work. Of course it didn't. It never does, and it isn't supposed to. That's not a flaw in her. It's the method itself, running in the wrong direction, exactly as described. What changed things wasn't a breakthrough phone call. It was smaller than that, and far less dramatic. One evening, worn out from 4 days of gripping something she had no control over, she gave up. Not on the opportunity, on the grip. She sat down, put a hand over her chest without any particular ceremony attached to it, and let out a longer breath than she'd let herself take in days. She wasn't trying to manifest anything in that moment. She was just tired of holding on so tightly to a shape that hadn't arrived and might never arrive the way she'd pictured it. The next morning, a second, completely unrelated message appeared. From someone else entirely. A former manager she hadn't spoken to in over a year, mentioning almost the same company in an unrelated context for an unrelated reason. That's the moment that actually mattered. Not the first message, the second one. The one that showed up from a different, independent source, echoing something she'd almost dismissed days earlier. Most people never notice second occurrences because they've already stopped watching for the first one by the time it arrives. She noticed because for the first time in days, she was watching instead of waiting. She did one small thing that same day. She reached out directly, mentioned both conversations, asked a single specific question about the role. Not a grand gesture. A 5-minute message, sent without any certainty attached to it. That single small action didn't guarantee anything on its own, but it became the second link in something that hadn't existed a week earlier. One small opening, met instead of dismissed, connecting to a second one, met instead of dismissed, each decision creating the conditions for the next. That's what a chain of consents actually looks like from the inside. Not one dramatic yes. A sequence of small, almost invisible ones, each one only possible because the one before it wasn't ignored. She didn't know, in the moment, that this was the beginning of anything. It didn't feel like the start of a lucky season of her life. It felt, honestly, mildly interesting. A little bit promising, not remotely certain. That's worth sitting with, because it's true of almost every real opening, not just hers. The first sign in a sequence like this almost never announces itself as significant. It doesn't arrive with weight, or certainty, or a soundtrack. It arrives small, ambiguous, and easy to talk yourself out of, and the entire chain depends on whether that first unremarkable moment gets met or gets missed. Months later, when people asked her how she landed the role, because eventually the small chain did lead somewhere real, a job, a raise, a version of her life that looked meaningfully different than it had a year earlier, she found herself saying the word almost everyone reaches for in moments like this. Luck. She got lucky. An old coworker happened to email her at the right time. But she knew, even as she said it, that the word didn't quite cover what had actually happened. It wasn't one lucky email. It was 4 days of nearly ruining the whole sequence by gripping it too hard, followed by 1 evening of finally letting go, followed by a second signal she almost missed, followed by 1 small, unglamorous action she almost didn't bother taking. Looking back, the whole thing had a shape to it, one opening leading cleanly to the next, almost like each one had somehow been aware of the one before it. That retrospective coherence is part of what makes a sequence like this feel, afterward, like it must have been arranged in advance. In the moment, none of it felt arranged. It felt uncertain, small, and easy to dismiss every single step of the way. What actually changed, underneath the story, wasn't her circumstances. Not at first. It was her relationship to circumstances that hadn't fully formed yet, her willingness to meet something before it had proven itself, instead of demanding proof before she'd meet it. She didn't become a different person overnight. But somewhere between the ceiling at 3 a.m. and the email she almost deleted, she stopped being someone who waited for a result to already look finished before she'd take it seriously. She became someone willing to notice a small, unfinished, imperfect opening and treat it as worth something anyway. That shift, quiet, undramatic, easy to miss even in her own life, is the actual mechanism behind almost every story anyone has ever called luck. What she did next is the part almost everyone skips, the part we're about to practice together. If you've ever caught yourself gripping an opportunity too tightly the way she did, tell us in the comments what you were actually afraid would happen if you let go. So here is the actual practice, in full, the part you came for, even if you didn't know that yet when this started. Third movement first, because it needs to be understood before it can be practiced. Receive. Receiving is not the same as being passive. Say that again, internally, because most people confuse the two completely. Passivity waits for something to arrive without doing anything. Receiving is active. It requires a specific kind of tolerance, a willingness to accept something incomplete, something small, something ambiguous, something that looks, on the surface, almost disappointing compared to what you were picturing. That's the threshold, not a threshold of effort, a threshold of acceptance. How much imperfection can you let through before you dismiss it? Most of the biggest changes in most people's lives, looking back honestly, began exactly there, as something incomplete, small, or ambiguous that could easily have been dismissed, and almost was. Let's start with the body, because everything else in this practice depends on it. Sit however you're sitting right now. You don't need to change your posture, or find a special position, or do anything that would look unusual to someone watching. Just notice your breath, as it already is, without trying to change it yet. Now, gently, let the next exhale run a little longer than it wants to. Not forced, not dramatic, just slightly longer than automatic. Let the air leave slowly enough that you can feel it leaving. Do that again. A slightly longer exhale than the one before, and a third time. Notice, if you can, that something in your shoulders has already dropped slightly. Something behind your eyes has softened, even if only a fraction. That's not imagination. That's your nervous system registering, 3 exhales in, that whatever it was bracing against a few minutes ago isn't actually here right now. If you'd like a 4th exhale, take it. There's no fixed number that makes this practice work. The count matters less than the direction. Longer out than in, every time, is the entire mechanism. Now bring one hand to rest over your chest. No ceremony required, just the weight of your own hand resting there. This is the gesture of consent we mentioned earlier. Small, physical, symbolic, not magical. It says, in a language your body understands better than words, I am not forcing this door. I am willing to let it open. If there's a single word attached to something you've been hoping for, not a full sentence, not a speech, just one word, you can let it surface now, quietly, without announcing it to anyone, including yourself, with any particular intensity. Let it sit there, under your hand, with the same weight as your breath. There's no need to hold this for any particular length of time. A few seconds is enough for the gesture to register as consent rather than as another task to complete correctly. Stay there for a moment before we move to the next part. Now, the second practice, reconstruction. Think of one good thing that's already true in your life right now. Not the biggest thing you can imagine, just one real thing, already present, a relationship, an opportunity, a piece of stability, anything that, if you're honest, you didn't have to fight for every single day to keep. Now trace it backward, not to some grand origin story, to the actual, specific, probably unremarkable moment it began. A message, a conversation you almost skipped, an introduction someone made in passing without much thought, a decision you made on an ordinary day for reasons that felt minor at the time. Almost every time, when people do this honestly, they find the same thing. The origin was small. Smaller than the result that eventually grew out of it. Smaller than they remembered before they went looking. Someone doing this exercise recently traced their closest friendship back through 15 years of memory, expecting some dramatic beginning, a crisis, a rescue, a moment either person could point to and say, that's when it started. What they actually found was smaller and far less cinematic. A seat assignment in a college class next to someone they don't remember choosing to sit beside. No decision, no effort, just proximity, followed by a few ordinary conversations, followed by 15 years neither of them planned in advance. If a friendship that's central to someone's life can trace back to something that unplanned, it's worth asking what else in your own life might share the same kind of quiet, unremarkable origin. That's worth sitting with for a moment, because it means the next small opening in your life, the one you haven't recognized yet, possibly because it hasn't announced itself as significant, is probably going to look exactly like that. Unremarkable. Easy to walk past. Not obviously the beginning of anything. There's a reason this reconstruction exercise matters beyond the memory itself. Every time you find one of these small origins in your own history, you're training the same filter that decides what to notice going forward. You're teaching it directly, with your own evidence. Small things count. Ambiguous things count. Things that don't announce themselves still count. That lesson doesn't stay contained to the past. It changes what your attention is willing to flag tomorrow morning. and the morning after that. Both practices, the breath and the reconstruction, are doing the same underlying work from two different angles, lowering the bar for what counts as worth noticing. That lowered bar isn't carelessness, it's precision, aimed at a target most people have been aiming past for years. Which brings us to the part you can actually carry with you when this video ends, a practice for the next 3 days. The instruction is simpler than anything else in this video. For the next 3 days, don't treat the first occurrence of anything as a sign. Not the first time a name comes up, not the first small message, not the first minor opening. The first occurrence is just information. Let it pass without deciding what it means. But watch for the second one. A second, independent source, a different person, a different context, a different angle, pointing toward something similar to what the first occurrence already mentioned. That's not proof of anything mystical. It's simply a pattern worth taking seriously, the same way you'd take a second data point seriously in any other part of your life. When the second occurrence shows up, usually within those 3 days if you're actually watching instead of waiting, do one small thing about it that same day. Not a massive decision. Not quitting a job or making an announcement. A reply, a question, a 5-minute action that acknowledges the opening instead of letting it pass by unanswered, the way it would have a week ago. If 3 days pass and nothing announces itself as a second occurrence, that isn't proof this doesn't work. It's simply information. Either the window needs to extend a little longer, or your attention is still filtering more tightly than it feels like it is. Either way, the response is the same one this entire practice has pointed to from the beginning. Not more effort, just less obstruction. Keep breathing longer than you inhale. Keep watching instead of waiting. The window doesn't close in one sitting. One more thing worth saying clearly, so you don't set yourself up to miss it. The first real sign in your own life almost certainly will not feel grand when it arrives. It will feel mildly interesting, slightly curious, barely worth mentioning to anyone else. That's not a sign that it doesn't matter. Based on everything we've walked through together, that's closer to a sign that it does. Drop a comment with the one word you let surface under your hand a few minutes ago. Just the word, nothing else. It helps make the practice real instead of theoretical. The hardest part of everything you just practiced isn't the difficulty of any single step. Breathing longer, resting a hand on your chest, noticing a small memory, watching for a second occurrence. None of that is hard, technically. The hard part is deciding that something this small deserves your attention in the first place. You were taught, somewhere along the way, to wait for a door. Something obvious. Something unmistakable. Something big enough to justify stopping what you're doing and paying attention. But the opening in front of you right now, and the one after that, and the one after that, was probably never going to be a door. It was always going to be a narrow opening, a gap, a slit. Easy to miss, unless you already know to look for it. The obstacle was never really difficulty. Walking through a narrow opening isn't hard. Noticing that it's worth walking through at all, that's the part that trips almost everyone, every time. It's significant enough to deserve the 2 minutes it takes to respond, the 5 minutes it takes to ask, the decision to reply instead of delete. You were looking for a door. The opportunity was a slit. One more layer is still waiting, the one we promised at the very beginning, the one that was supposed to change how you see all of this. Here it is, and it isn't a clean answer. It's a question, left open on purpose. Some of what you've just walked through can be explained one way. The present pushes the future forward. You breathe differently. You observe differently. You receive differently. And as a direct result, you meet more of what was always available but previously invisible to you. Cause, then effect. Simple, defensible, complete. But there's another way to read the exact same sequence, and it doesn't cancel out the first one. It sits right alongside it, unresolved. What if, instead, the future is pulling the present toward it? What if the reason a sequence of small openings looks, in hindsight, so perfectly connected, one leading cleanly to the next, almost like they were aware of each other, is that some part of it was already arranged, and your job was never to create it, only to become someone capable of meeting it in time? Nobody can prove which one is true. Maybe both are, in ways neither language nor physics has fully caught up to yet. This video won't resolve that question, and it won't pretend to. Whichever one turns out to be closer to true, the instructions written across the last several minutes don't change. That's usually a good sign that you're looking at something worth trusting, even without final proof, when every honest interpretation of a question still points you toward the same practical action. Here's what's worth noticing instead. Both explanations ask exactly the same thing of you. Breathe. Observe. Receive. Whether you're building the sequence forward or meeting one already being built toward you, the practice is identical either way. You no longer chase. You allow. If this reached you today, it probably wasn't the first sign. It might be the second. Before you go, follow, so the next layer of this actually finds you when it's ready. Share this with 5 people who are still waiting for a door instead of watching for an opening. Leave a comment, not a required phrase, just whatever is honestly true for you right now, and tell us what you want the next video to be about, because the next layer is already forming, the same way this one did. Breathe. Observe. Receive.